The war had lasted so long that no one remembered how it started. The great empires of the galaxy have fought for centuries, their fleets clashing across countless star systems, their armies burning planets to ash. There was no end in sight, no peace talks, no chance of surrender, just an endless cycle of destruction, where each battle only fed the hatred that had been passed down through generations. The stars had become graves, and the war had become the only thing that mattered. Admiral Xiron of the Vorthan Dominion sat in the command chamber of his warship, his four glowing eyes fixed on the holographic display before him. The enemy fleet, the mighty armada of the Zarkali Empire, was forming up on the other side of the system. Thousands of ships, bristling with weapons, engines burning bright as they prepared for another battle. The Vorthans had been fighting the Zarkali for 300 years. It was an old war, and today was just another battle. A communication officer turned to Xiron, his voice steady despite the tension. "Admiral, all forces are in position. We await your command." Xiron nodded. There was no need for speeches. His fleet knew their duty. The order was given, and the great engines of war moved forward, closing the distance between the two armadas. Space itself trembled as thousands of plasma cannons, railguns, and missile batteries powered up. Shields flared to life, a sea of glowing energy protecting each vessel. The battle was about to begin. And then it happened. A new signal appeared on the scanners. It was small at first, a faint reading that barely registered. But then it grew stronger. Closer. Something was coming. Something huge. The sensors flickered, struggling to process the data. The energy readings were unlike anything seen before. Xiron's hands tightened into fists as he turned toward his officers. "What is that?" The officer at the scanner station hesitated. I don't know, Admiral. It's..." Before he could finish, the ship's main screen lit up with an image. It was a battleship. A massive dark war machine unlike anything in the known galaxy. It moved with the slow, terrifying grace of a predator that feared nothing. Its hull was smooth and black, its surface marked only by strange, glowing lines that pulsed with energy. There were no visible weapons, no insignias, no transmissions, just silent, unstoppable motion. Xiron felt a chill run through him. The enemy fleet had seen it too. The Zarkali Admiral, a towering reptilian creature with gleaming red scales, appeared on the communication screen. "What is that?" he demanded, his voice edged with fear. Xiron had no answer. The data was impossible. This ship, this unknown monster, was larger than any battleship ever built. Larger than even the command stations that controlled entire fleets. It was moving directly toward the battlefield, and yet it did not belong to either side. A low hum filled the air. The ship was charging something. Panic spread through the fleets. Commanders shouted orders. Ships adjusted positions, unsure whether to attack or flee. But before any action could be taken, a light erupted from the unknown battleship. A single beam, silent and controlled, fired across the system. It did not strike a ship. It did not target any of the fleets. Instead, it hit a nearby moon, a cold, barren rock that had stood in the system for millions of years. And in an instant, the moon was gone. There was no explosion, no debris, no shockwave. The moon simply ceased to exist, erased from reality by a power beyond comprehension. The battle was forgotten. The war was forgotten. For the first time in centuries, silence filled the void. Xiron could hear his own breathing. The Zarkali Admiral stared at the screen, his red eyes wide with disbelief. Across both fleets, weapons were powered down. Engines went cold. Every soldier, every pilot, every officer watched as the monstrous battleship continued its slow, unstoppable approach. Then, finally, a transmission came. One message, broadcast in every language of the known galaxy. "Leave this battlefield, or be erased." Xiron had never felt fear before. He had fought in hundreds of battles, stood before death more times than he could count. But now, for the first time, he hesitated. He was not alone. The entire fleet, both fleets, remained frozen, waiting for someone to act. The Zarkali admiral growled, his claws digging into his command chair. No one threatens the Zarkali Empire. I refuse to be intimidated by. His words were cut off by another hum. The battleship was charging again. Sciron knew what would happen next, and in that moment he made a choice. He turned to his officers and gave a single, sharp command. Retreat. His officers hesitated. They had never heard that word from him before, but he did not repeat himself. The fleet began to move, their engines flaring as they turned away from the battlefield. The Zarkali forces, unwilling to show weakness, remained in place. Their admiral's voice echoed through the system. Cowards, we will not. A second beam fired. Sciron did not look back. He did not need to. The Zarkali armada was powerful, but he knew they would not survive. The unknown battleship was not here to negotiate. It was not here to fight in their war. It was something else, something far beyond their understanding. As his fleet jumped to hyperspace, Sciron's mind raced. Who built that ship? What was its purpose? And most importantly, was this just the beginning? Sciron's fleet had fled, but the questions remained. The war had lasted for centuries, but nothing had ever halted a battle before. The appearance of the unknown battleship had changed everything. It was not a weapon of the Vorthans, nor did it belong to the Zarkali Empire. It had come from the void, erased a moon with ease, and issued a warning that sent fear rippling through every commander in the sector. The Vorthan fleet regrouped in a secure system, far from the battle they had abandoned. The admiral stood in the war room, surrounded by his top officers, their expressions tense. The holographic display before them showed the last transmission of the mysterious ship. The voice had been calm, cold, and absolute. Leave this battlefield, or be erased. One of Sciron's officers, a seasoned strategist named Oral, stepped forward. Admiral, we need to understand what we saw. That battleship, it's unlike anything in the known galaxy. Another officer, a younger lieutenant, hesitated before speaking. Sir, what if it's a weapon from a forgotten civilization? There have always been myths about ancient superweapons, lost empires. Sciron raised a hand, silencing him. Speculation is useless. We need information. The problem was, there was none. The Vorthan intelligence network had no records of such a vessel. The Galactic archives had no mention of a civilization capable of creating a ship like that. Even the most advanced empires, those who had spent millennia perfecting war, had never built something that could erase a celestial body in an instant. The silence in the war room was heavy. Then a sudden alert filled the space. A priority transmission was coming through. Sciron turned sharply. From where? The communication officer's eyes widened. Sir, it's from the unknown battleship. A chill passed through the room. Every officer exchanged glances, unsure of what to expect. The last time this ship had spoken, it had given an ultimatum. Now, it was reaching out to them directly. Sciron took a deep breath. Put it through. The holographic display shifted. A figure appeared, though it was not what they expected. It was human. A single human male, clad in a dark uniform with no insignia. His features were sharp, his eyes cold, calculating. He looked at them as if he already knew everything about them. This is Admiral Elias Voss of the UNSV Judgment, the man said, his voice steady. You have questions. I have answers. A murmur spread through the officers. A human. Sciron narrowed his glowing eyes. He had heard of humanity before, a minor species, barely considered relevant in galactic politics. They had no empire, no war fleets, no colonies spanning the stars. Just a single planet, Earth. And yet, this man stood before them, commanding a warship that defied all logic. Sciron straightened. Admiral Voss, explain yourself. Why did you interfere in our war? The human did not react to the demand. Instead, he leaned slightly forward, his voice calm but unwavering. Your war is irrelevant. It has always been irrelevant. A conflict of blind ambition and outdated grudges. You waste your existence fighting over scraps of territory, while something far worse is coming. Zyron's jaw tightened. He had fought too long to tolerate being lectured. We do not need lessons from a species that has barely left its own system. If you think your technology will intimidate us. It's not about intimidation, Voss interrupted. It's about survival. The room fell silent again. Voss let his words settle before continuing. We detected an anomaly at the edge of the galaxy, he said. Something old. Something powerful. My ship was sent to investigate. What we found was, he hesitated for the first time, his expression hardening. Unnatural. We are no longer the only ones in this galaxy. Zyron felt a strange, unfamiliar sensation creeping into his mind. Doubt. Humans had always been beneath his notice, but now, as he watched this lone admiral, he realized something. This was not a man who feared the Vorthan Dominion. This was a man who had seen something far worse. What are you saying? Zyron asked. Voss stared at him, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of something terrifying. I'm saying that your war is about to become meaningless, because the real war hasn't even begun. Zyron had been a warrior for over a century. He had led fleets into battle, crushed rebellions, and outmaneuvered the greatest strategists of his time. But never had he felt the kind of unease that now settled in his chest like a heavy weight. The human's words echoed in his mind. The real war hasn't even begun. The war room was silent, every officer waiting for Zyron's response. The holographic image of Admiral Voss remained steady, his expression unreadable. It was infuriating. Humans were insignificant. Their fleets were non-existent. And yet, here one stood, in command of a ship that had reduced a moon to dust, as if it were nothing. Zyron narrowed his eyes. If you expect us to cower because of vague warnings, you have miscalculated, human. Voss remained unmoved. I don't expect you to cower. I expect you to listen. Zyron leaned forward. Then speak. If this threat is real, prove it. Voss let out a slow breath. Then the holographic display shifted. The image of his face disappeared, replaced by a map of the galaxy. The bright red marker pulsed at the very edge of known space. This, Voss said, is where we found it. The display zoomed in, revealing a dead star system. No habitable planets. No signs of life. But something was there. A structure. Massive, ancient, and wrong. Even through the grainy sensor data, Zyron could see that whatever this was, it had no place in the natural universe. We detected traces of an energy signature we've never seen before, Voss continued. It was awake, a presence, watching. He exhaled sharply. It wasn't just an anomaly. It was waiting for something. One of Zyron's officers, Oral, crossed his arms. Waiting for what? Voss's gaze darkened. For a signal. The tension in the room thickened. Zyron felt something cold creep into his veins. A signal from whom? The holographic display flickered again. A new image appeared. A battlefield. Not from the present, but from history. Massive ships, broken and shattered, drifted through space like forgotten corpses. The architecture of these vessels was unfamiliar. This war, Voss said, his voice quieter now, happened long before any of us existed. Before the Vorthan, before the Zarkali, before even the oldest empires recorded time. These ships belonged to civilizations so ancient that their names are lost to history, and they all died fighting the same enemy. Zyron stared at the wreckage. What enemy? Voss looked directly at him. The ones who left that structure behind. A chill ran through the room. No one spoke. The energy signature we detected. Voss continued. It wasn't just an anomaly. It was a transmission. His voice was grim. Something out there received it. Zyron's claws tightened against the control panel. "You're telling me this war, our war, has awakened something?" Voss nodded. "Something that should have remained buried." Aurel scoffed. "And what proof do you have that this ancient enemy still exists?" Voss's expression was unreadable. Then the holographic display changed one final time. A new image appeared. A fleet. No, not a fleet. Something worse. Dark, jagged ships, shaped like monstrous things that had never known light. The sensors had barely caught them before the judgment fled the system. But they were real. Zyron's breath caught in his throat. Voss's voice was barely above a whisper. "They exist." "You said." The war room was deathly silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The image on the holographic display, those dark, jagged ships, seemed to radiate something beyond just their shape. Something primal. Something wrong. Zyron had fought countless enemies, from the Zarkali Empire's battle fleets to the machine swarms of the Outer Rim. But this was different. He could feel it. This was not just another opponent in the endless cycle of war. This was something else. His officers shifted uncomfortably, exchanging nervous glances. Even Aurel, the most skeptical among them, had lost his usual arrogance. It was clear that whatever Voss had shown them had rattled everyone in the room. Zyron finally broke the silence. "How do you know they're coming?" Voss didn't hesitate. "Because they already are." The room tensed. Voss continued, his voice steady but grim. "After we discovered the ruins, we left behind a probe to monitor the area. 5 standard cycles later, it transmitted its final report." He pressed a button on his console, and a short burst of distorted audio filled the war room. A deep, guttural sound. Not static, not mechanical. It was something alive. Then a single word, spoken in no language Zyron recognized, yet somehow he understood it. "Awakened." Then the transmission cut off. One of the younger officers, barely out of his training years, swallowed hard. "Sir, this could be a deception, a trick." But his voice lacked conviction. Aurel straightened. "And what proof do you have that they are coming here?" Voss's expression darkened. The probe detected movement before it was destroyed. "They aren't just awake. They're mobilizing." Zyron inhaled sharply. "For what purpose?" Voss leaned forward, his eyes cold. "To finish what they started eons ago." A heavy silence fell over the war room. The implications were clear. Whatever these things were, they had once fought against the greatest civilizations the galaxy had ever known. And they had won. Aurel's voice was quieter this time. "How much time do we have?" Voss's answer sent a chill through everyone present. "Not enough." Zyron clenched his jaw. This war, his war, had already drained his people, but he knew without a doubt that it was nothing compared to what was coming. And for the first time in centuries, he felt something he had long forgotten. Fear. Voss's image remained steady. "You have 2 choices, Admiral Tyron. Continue your war with the Zarkali, waste your fleets, or prepare for what's coming." Zyron looked at the dark ships on the display again. The war that had lasted for generations now seemed meaningless. The real war had begun. Zyron stood at the edge of the war room, staring at the holographic display of those twisted, nightmarish ships. His mind raced with calculations, strategies, anything to make sense of the situation. But no matter how many scenarios he ran through, the outcome was the same. His empire was not prepared for this. The Vorthan fleet had spent decades locked in war with the Zarkali, both sides exhausting their resources in an endless cycle of destruction. Their battle lines stretched across half the known galaxy, consuming entire worlds in the process. And now, a new enemy, one older and far deadlier, was waking. Voss remained silent, waiting. Zyron could see it in the human's expression. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't demanding surrender. He was giving them a choice. And Zyron hated that he knew what the right choice was. Aurel finally broke the silence. His voice was tense, but controlled. If what you're saying is true, then why haven't they attacked yet? Voss exhaled. They don't need to rush. We're doing their job for them. The more we fight each other, the weaker we become. They're patient. They've waited millennia. What's a few more years of war? Zyron's claws tapped against the console. Then why warn us? Voss leaned forward, his gaze sharp. Because we're running out of time. We detected their movement. It won't be long before they make their first move. He paused. And when they do, it won't be a battle. It will be extermination. Zyron gritted his teeth. Every instinct in his warrior's soul rebelled at the idea of stopping the war. The Vorthen had fought too long, sacrificed too much. To abandon it now, to suddenly shift their focus elsewhere, it was unthinkable. But so was extinction. Oral's jaw tightened. You expect us to believe that humanity is prepared for this. That you, a species barely a few centuries into space travel, have an answer. Voss didn't blink. We don't have all the answers. But we have something you don't. Zyron narrowed his eyes. And what's that? Voss's lips curled into the faintest smile. A battleship capable of turning entire moons into dust. A ripple of unease moved through the war room. They had all seen the footage. The judgment had demonstrated its power, and even the most skeptical among them had been forced to acknowledge it. Zyron exhaled sharply. You're suggesting an alliance. Voss nodded. A temporary one. A real one. His voice hardened. Because if we don't stand together now, there won't be anyone left to fight later. Zyron turned away, staring at the stars outside the viewport. He had spent his entire existence preparing for war, but not this war. Not against an enemy that had no fear, no weakness, no desire for conquest, only destruction. He knew what he had to do. But he also knew the Vorthen Council would never accept it. Oral's voice was quiet. They'll never agree, Admiral. Zyron turned back to Voss. Then I'll make them. For the first time in centuries, a new war was beginning. One that would decide the fate of the entire galaxy. You said. Zyron stood before the Vorthen High Council, his body tense, his mind sharp. The massive chamber, carved from obsidian and lined with banners of war, was filled with the most powerful leaders of his species. They had ruled for generations, guiding their people through endless conflicts, each victory solidifying their supremacy. But today, for the first time, Zyron was not here to plan a war. He was here to stop one. The Supreme Chancellor, an elder warrior with scars that told of countless battles, regarded him with cold, piercing eyes. You wish to abandon our war with the Zarkali, to turn our fleets away from our rightful conquest. His voice was laced with disbelief and anger. Zyron met his gaze without flinching. If we do not, we will all perish. Not just the Vorthen, not just the Zarkali, every species in this galaxy. Murmurs spread across the chamber like a wave. Zyron clenched his fists. He knew what they were thinking. He had once thought the same way. The Vorthen did not retreat. They did not surrender. To even consider stepping away from battle was unthinkable. But this was not an ordinary war. One of the counselors leaned forward, his voice filled with disdain. And you expect us to trust a human? A species that has barely survived its own wars. A species that was nothing but an insignificant flicker in the stars until recently. Zyron's jaw tightened. I have seen their battleship with my own eyes. It is no flicker. He exhaled sharply, forcing himself to remain calm. The war with the Zarkali has consumed us. We are weakened, blinded by our hatred. We have spilled oceans of blood, yet we have gained nothing but ruins. And now, in our arrogance, we are walking into our own extinction. The murmurs grew louder, some filled with outrage, others with uncertainty. The Supreme Chancellor narrowed his eyes. And what proof do you have that this ancient enemy exists? Zyron turned to his personal console, activating the holographic display. A new image filled the chamber. Dark, jagged warships, moving in complete silence through the void. No insignia, no transmissions, only cold, lethal precision. A deep chill settled over the room. Chiron let the silence stretch before speaking again. These ships do not negotiate. They do not conquer. They destroy. He turned, facing the council head-on. Our war with the Zarkali must end. Our fleets must unite, or we will be wiped from existence. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, a deep, guttural laugh echoed through the chamber. It came from an elder warlord, one of the oldest members of the council. He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with something dangerous. "You speak of fear, Chiron." His voice was calm, but there was an edge of mockery. "You tremble at the sight of these shadows." He rose to his feet, his massive frame towering over the others. "But we are Vorthan. We do not cower before darkness. We are the storm that swallows the stars." Several counselors nodded in agreement. The old ways were deeply rooted. Chiron had expected this reaction, but it still frustrated him. He took a step forward, then faced them. His voice was steady, but it carried an iron weight. "Go to the void. Meet these things in battle." His eyes hardened. "And when your warships burn, when your warriors are slaughtered before they even fire a shot, remember this moment." The elder's expression faltered, just slightly. Chiron pressed on. "I am not asking for surrender. I am not asking for weakness." His voice grew louder. "I am asking for survival." He turned to the Supreme Chancellor. "Give me the fleet. Give me the chance to fight them before they reach our homeworlds." The Supreme Chancellor studied him for a long time. The chamber was silent once more. Finally, he spoke. "You will have one fleet, Chiron." His voice was low, measured. "One chance to prove your fears are real." Chiron nodded, his heart pounding. It wasn't enough. It was barely a fraction of their strength. But it was a start. As he turned to leave, his mind was already racing. He had to move quickly. The storm was coming. And if they failed here, there would be no second chance. "You said." Chiron stood on the bridge of the Vorthan dreadnought Iron Fang. His eyes locked onto the void beyond. The fleet had gathered, smaller than he had hoped, but powerful nonetheless. The Supreme Chancellor had granted him one fleet, and he intended to make every ship count. Beside him, Voss watched in silence. The human admiral had said little since their departure, but his presence carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. This was it, the battle that would decide everything. The enemy had come. Dark shapes emerged from the abyss, their silhouettes jagged and unnatural, as if the void itself had taken form. No transmissions, no warnings, just the silent advance of death. The bridge was quiet. Even the hardened Vorthan officers, warriors who had fought for centuries, felt the chill in the air. Then the first attack came. One of the Vorthan destroyers simply vanished. No explosion, no debris, just an instant of existence, and then nothing. The crew barely had time to react before another ship was torn apart by an unseen force. "They're using weaponry beyond our understanding," Orel muttered, his voice uncharacteristically tense. Voss remained calm. "Then we hit them harder." Chiron gritted his teeth. "All ships, open fire." The void lit up as beams of energy and railgun rounds poured toward the enemy. The human battleship Judgment unleashed a single shot, a beam so bright it carved through the darkness like a sword through flesh. One of the enemy ships was struck. It shuddered, its unnatural form breaking apart, but it did not explode. Instead, it twisted, its structure reforming as if resisting death itself. Chiron's stomach turned. Then the real horror began. The enemy ships moved in ways that defied logic, their hulls shifting like liquid metal, dodging fire with an eerie intelligence. Where they struck, Vorthan warships were torn apart as if they were made of paper. It was a massacre. Chiron slammed his fist against the console. "We cannot win this with firepower alone." He turned to Voss. "Tell me you have a plan." Voss exhaled slowly. "We didn't come here to fight them in a battle of attrition." He tapped a control panel, revealing a new set of coordinates. "We came here to stop them before they spread." Sciron's eyes widened. "You're leading them toward the anomaly." Voss nodded. "It's the only way. The same way they came into our galaxy. We forced them back." It was madness. But at this point, madness was the only thing they had left. Sciron activated the fleet-wide comms. "All ships, retreat to the designated coordinates. Lure them in." The fleet moved in unison, shifting course. The enemy pursued, relentless as ever. One by one, Vorthan and human warships fell, but they had no choice. The trap had to be set. As they neared the rift, the anomaly from which these creatures had emerged, Voss gave the order. Now. Judgment fired its main weapon directly into the anomaly. The energy pulse ruptured space itself, triggering a chain reaction unlike anything they had ever seen. The void screamed. The enemy ships convulsed, their forms flickering, struggling to resist. But the pull of the collapsing anomaly was too strong. One by one, the nightmares were dragged back into the abyss. And then, silence. Sciron let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The battle was over. But the cost had been enormous. Half the fleet was gone. And he knew, deep down, that this was only a delay. Voss turned to him, his expression unreadable. "They'll come back." Sciron nodded. "And next time, we'll be ready." The war was over for now, but the galaxy would never be the same again.